Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Thunder Bay, watching the stars through the thick glass windows. His hands were shaking, but he tried to hide it from his crew. The ship was moving fast through space, but not fast enough. Behind them, the enemy was getting closer. The Thunder Bay was the best ship humans had ever built. It was big and strong, with thick metal walls and powerful guns. The ship had new technology that was supposed to make it invisible to enemy sensors. But today nothing seemed to be working right. "Captain, they're still following us," said Lieutenant Amy Davis from her seat at the navigation controls. Her voice was quiet, but Jake could hear the fear in it. Amy was young, only 25, but she was the best navigator in the human fleet. If anyone could find them a way out, it would be her. Jake looked at the big screen that showed space around them. Red dots were moving closer to the green dot that was their ship. There were too many red dots to count. The Galactic Empire had sent their entire fleet to destroy humanity, and the Thunder Bay was all that stood between Earth and total destruction. "How many ships are out there, Pete?" Jake asked his tactical officer. Commander Pete Walsh checked his computer screens. His face was pale as he read the numbers. 200 ships, sir. Maybe more. They have us surrounded on all sides." Jake felt his heart sink. 200 ships against one. Even the Thunder Bay, with all its advanced weapons and armor, could not fight that many enemies at once, but they had to try. Earth was counting on them. The mission had seemed simple when they started. The Thunder Bay was supposed to break through the enemy blockade around Earth's solar system. Once they got past the enemy ships, they would fly to the neutral colonies where human settlements existed. There they could get help and bring back reinforcements to save Earth. But the Empire had been waiting for them. Somehow, their sensors had seen through the Thunder Bay's stealth technology. The moment the human ship tried to leave the solar system, enemy vessels appeared from everywhere. "Chief Grant, what's wrong with our stealth system?" Jake called to his chief engineer. Lisa Grant was bent over her control panel, pressing buttons and checking readings. She was a small woman with short brown hair, but she knew more about the ship's engines and systems than anyone else on board. "I don't know, Captain," she said, frustration clear in her voice. "Everything looks normal on my end. The stealth field is working perfectly, but they can still see us somehow." Jake walked over to the communication station where Linda Hayes was trying to contact Earth. Linda was young, like most of the crew, but she was good at her job. "Any word from home?" Jake asked. Linda shook her head sadly. "Nothing, sir. The Empire is jamming all our signals. I can't get through to Earth Command." The ship shook suddenly as enemy fire hit their shields. Jake grabbed onto a rail to keep from falling. "Damage report," he shouted. "Shields are down to 60%, called out Tom Baker from the weapons station. Tom was a big man with strong arms from years of military training. "But our guns are still working fine, Captain." Jake made a quick decision. "All weapons fire at will, target the closest enemy ships." The Thunder Bay's guns opened fire, sending bright beams of energy toward the Empire vessels. The human weapons were powerful, and they destroyed 2 enemy ships in the first few seconds. But for every ship they destroyed, 3 more took its place. "Captain, we're taking heavy damage," Lisa reported from her station. "Hull breach on Deck 7. Emergency teams are responding." Jake's friend, Commander Rick Stone, was leading one of those emergency teams. Rick had been with Jake since they were both young officers fresh out of the academy. They had served together for 15 years through good times and bad. The ship shook again, harder this time. Sparks flew from some of the control panels, and the lights went out for a moment before coming back on. "Sir, Commander Stone's team is trapped on Deck 7, reported Sam Mitchell, the damage control officer. "The hull breach is too big, they can't get out." Jake felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. Rick was in danger, and there was nothing he could do about it. The battle was too intense to send help. More enemy fire hit the Thunder Bay. This time the ship didn't just shake. It rolled to one side, throwing everyone around the bridge. Jake hit the wall hard and felt pain shoot through his shoulder. "Shields are down to 20%, Tom reported, blood running down his face from where he had hit his head. "We can't take much more of this." Jake pulled himself back to his captain's chair and looked at the tactical display. The enemy ships were closing in from all directions. There was no way out. No matter which direction they turned, more Empire vessels were waiting for them. "Captain," Amy said quietly, "I'm not seeing any escape routes. They have us completely surrounded." Jake closed his eyes for a moment and thought about Earth. 3 billion people were depending on him and his crew. If the Thunder Bay was destroyed, there would be no one left to get help from the colonies. Earth would fall to the Empire, and humanity would be wiped out forever. "Sir, incoming message from Commander Stone," Linda said, her voice breaking. "Put him through," Jake ordered. Rick's voice came through the speakers, weak and full of static. "Jake, we're trapped down here. The whole section is filling with toxic gas from the damaged systems. We have maybe 5 minutes before..." The communication cut off suddenly. "Rick! Rick, can you hear me?" Jake shouted into his communicator, but there was no answer. Sam Mitchell checked his damaged control screens and looked up with tears in his eyes. "Captain, Deck 7 is gone. The entire section blew out into space. There were no survivors." Jake felt like the world had stopped. Rick was dead. His best friend, the man who had stood by him through everything, was gone. Along with him, 30 other crew members had died trying to save the ship. The Thunder Bay continued to take damage from enemy fire. More systems failed. More crew members were injured or killed. The ship that had been humanity's pride and joy was becoming a floating wreck. "Captain, what are your orders?" Pete asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jake looked around the bridge at his remaining crew. These people had followed him into this hopeless battle because they believed in him. They trusted him to find a way to save humanity. But now, surrounded by enemy ships with nowhere to run and their best systems failing, Jake didn't know what to do. The enemy fire was getting heavier. Warning alarms were going off all over the bridge. The Thunder Bay was dying, and soon the last hope for humanity would be gone forever. Jake took a deep breath and tried to think. There had to be something, some way to escape. But as he looked at the tactical display showing 200 enemy ships closing in for the kill, he wondered if this was really the end. The Thunder Bay was badly damaged, but it was still flying. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his chair, looking at the terrible situation on his screens. Enemy ships were everywhere, getting closer every minute. His crew was scared, and many good. People were already dead. But Chief Engineer Lisa Grant was not giving up. She was in the engine room, looking at data from the battle. Lisa was smart, very smart, and she noticed something strange about how the enemy ships moved. "Captain Morrison, please come to the engine room," Lisa said through the ship's communication system. "I need to show you something important." Jake left the bridge and walked quickly through the damaged corridors of his ship. The walls had burn marks from explosions, and some of the lights were broken. He could smell smoke and hear the sound of repair crews working to fix the damage. When Jake reached the engine room, Lisa was standing in front of a big computer screen. The screen showed the movement patterns of all the enemy ships during the battle. "Look at this, Captain," Lisa said, pointing at the screen. "See how the Empire ships move? They always turn the same way. They always attack from the same angles. They follow exact patterns." Jake looked at the screen but didn't understand what Lisa was trying to show him. "What do you mean?" Lisa pressed some buttons and the screen changed. Now it showed numbers and calculations instead of ship movements. "The aliens are too smart for their own good, Captain. Their computers calculate the perfect way to do everything. But perfect means predictable." Amy Davis, the navigator, had followed Jake to the engine room. She was also looking at the screen. "Lisa's right," Amy said. "I've been watching their movements too. Every time we turn left, they respond the same way. Every time we fire our guns, they move to the same defensive positions." Lisa nodded and brought up more data. "Their technology is better than ours, but they think like machines. They calculate everything. They don't know how to be random or unpredictable." Jake was starting to understand. "You're saying we can use this against them?" "Exactly," Lisa said with excitement in her voice. "Humans don't think like machines. We make mistakes. We do crazy things. We change our minds. The aliens can't calculate that because it doesn't make sense to them." Amy was already working on her navigation computer. "What if we stopped trying to be smart and started being stupid instead?" Lisa smiled for the first time since the battle began. That's exactly what I was thinking. Jake felt a small spark of hope. What do you need me to do? Give me permission to break every rule in the book, Lisa said. Let me run the engines in ways they were never meant to run. Let Amy fly the ship in patterns that make no sense. Let Tom fire the guns at random targets. Jake thought about it. What Lisa was suggesting was dangerous. They could destroy their own ship by accident, but they were going to die anyway if they kept fighting the normal way. Do it, Jake said. What do you call this plan? Lisa grinned. Protocol Chaos. Jake returned to the bridge and called his crew together. Listen, everyone, he said over the ship's speakers. We're going to try something new. Stop thinking like soldiers and start thinking like humans. Tom Baker looked confused from his weapons station. What does that mean, Captain? It means we're going to be unpredictable, Jake explained. Fire the guns at targets that don't matter. Shoot at empty space if you want to. Make the enemy think we've gone crazy. Linda Hayes at the communications station raised her hand. Captain, what about our radio signals? Make fake ones, Jake said. Make the enemy think there are more human ships out here. Make them think we have weapons we don't really have. Lie to them. Amy started the new plan first. Instead of flying the Thunder Bay in smooth, logical paths, she made the ship dart left and right like a scared animal. She flew toward enemy ships and then turned away at the last second. She made the ship spin and roll for no reason at all. The Empire ships didn't know how to respond. Their computers tried to calculate where the Thunder Bay would go next, but Amy's movements made no sense. The alien ships started bumping into each other as they tried to follow the crazy human ship. Tom began firing the weapons randomly. Instead of aiming for the most dangerous enemy ships, he shot at small targets, empty areas of space, and even asteroids that were floating nearby. The Empire ships couldn't figure out what the humans were trying to do. Linda created fake radio, signals that made it sound like there were 10 human ships instead of just one. She made up messages about secret weapons and surprise attacks. The alien ships started looking around nervously, trying to find enemies that didn't exist. In the engine room, Lisa was doing something that would have made other engineers very angry. She was running the ship's power systems in ways that were completely wrong according to all the training manuals. But somehow it was working. The Thunder Bay was moving faster and more unpredictably than ever before. Sam Mitchell was leading repair teams all over the ship. But instead of fixing things the right way, he was telling his people to make quick, messy repairs that would work for a short time. Don't worry about making it perfect, he told his teams. Just make it work long enough to get us out of here. The Empire ships were getting more confused by the minute. Their perfect battle plans were useless against human chaos. Some of the alien ships started firing at each other by accident because they couldn't tell what was real and what was fake. Dr. Karen White, the science officer, was watching the enemy ships on her sensors. Captain, look at this, she said with amazement. The Empire fleet is breaking apart. They're so confused that they're making mistakes. Jake watched his main screen as enemy ships crashed into each other and fired at the wrong targets. The perfect alien formation was becoming a mess. It's working, Amy said from her navigation station. They can't predict what we'll do next because we don't know what we'll do next. Lisa's voice came through from the engine room. Captain, I have an idea for something even crazier. What if we could make tiny jumps through space? Too small for their sensors to track, but big enough to move us around the battlefield quickly. Is that possible? Jake asked. Not normally, Lisa admitted, but our warp drive is already damaged. If I use it wrong, it might do exactly what we need. Jake made another quick decision. Do it. Sir, that could tear the ship apart, Dr. White warned. We're dead if we stay here anyway, Jake replied. Lisa, make it happen. The Thunder Bay suddenly disappeared from the Empire sensors for a split second, then reappeared behind a group of enemy ships. The alien ships spun around in confusion, trying to figure out how the human ship had moved so fast. Jake smiled as he watched the chaos on his screen. For the first time since the battle began, the humans were winning. Not because they were stronger or smarter than the aliens, but because they were more human. The Thunder Bay was jumping around the battlefield like a ghost. 1 second it was in front of an Empire ship, The next second, it appeared behind another group of enemies. The alien ships were firing at empty space where the human ship used to. Captain Jake Morrison watched his screen with growing excitement. The Empire fleet that had seemed so powerful was now confused and angry. Their perfect formations were broken, and some of their ships were shooting at each other by mistake. "Lisa, how long can we keep doing these jumps?" Jake asked through the communication system. Chief Engineer Lisa Grant's voice came back from the engine room, but she sounded worried. "Not long, Captain. Each jump is putting huge stress on our damaged systems. The warp core is getting very hot. We might have 5 or 6 more jumps before something breaks." Jake knew they had to make those jumps count. He looked around the bridge, at his crew. Amy was flying the ship with a big smile on her face. Tom was shooting at enemy ships that couldn't figure out where the attacks were coming from. Everyone was working together better than ever before. "Amy, take us behind that big enemy ship," Jake ordered, pointing at the largest vessel in the Empire fleet. The Thunder Bay disappeared again and reappeared right behind the Empire flagship. Tom fired all their weapons at once, hitting the big ship's engines. The alien vessel started spinning out of control, crashing into 2 smaller ships nearby. The Empire Admiral, Zexathera, was getting very angry. His perfect plan to destroy the humans was falling apart. He sent angry messages to all his ships, ordering them to stop making mistakes and fight properly. But his ships couldn't fight properly because they didn't understand what the humans were doing. "Captain, I'm seeing something interesting," said Dr. Karen White from her science station. "The Empire ships are trying to copy our movements. They're attempting to be random like us." Jake laughed. "How's that working for them?" "Not good," Dr. White replied. "They're too used to following rules. When they try to be random, they just create new patterns. It's like they don't know how to be truly chaotic." Pete Walsh, the tactical officer, was studying the enemy formation. "Captain, I think I see a weakness. If we can make one more big jump, we might be able to break through their lines completely." Jake looked at the tactical display. Pete was right. There was a small gap between 2 groups of Empire ships. If they could get through that gap, they would be free to escape toward the colonies. "Lisa, can we make one really big jump?" Jake asked. There was a long pause before Lisa answered. "Maybe, Captain, but it would use all our remaining power. If it doesn't work, we'll be sitting dead in space with no weapons and no shields." Jake thought about the choice. They could keep making small jumps and fighting, but eventually their systems would fail anyway. Or they could risk everything on one big escape attempt. "What do you think, crew?" Jake asked over the ship's speakers. "Should we go for it?" The answers came back quickly from all over the ship. "Yes, Captain." "Let's do it." "We're with you." "Go for it, sir." Jake felt proud of his people. Even facing death, they were ready to take risks and fight for their home world. "All right, Lisa. Set up for the biggest jump you can manage. Amy, plot a course straight through their formation. Tom, charge up all our weapons. If we're going to do this, we're going all out." But just as they were preparing for the escape jump, something terrible happened. Empire ships started firing concentrated beams at the Thunder Bay from 3 different directions. The human ship's shields couldn't handle that much firepower. "Shield failure," Tom shouted. "We're taking direct hits to the hull." The Thunder Bay shook violently. Explosions echoed through the corridors. Smoke filled the bridge, and several control panels caught fire. "Captain, the jump drive is damaged," Lisa reported. "I can't make the big jump anymore." Jake felt his heart sink. Their escape plan was ruined. But then Pete Walsh stood up from his tactical station. "Captain, I have an idea," Pete said calmly. "But you're not going to like it." "Tell me," Jake said. Pete pointed at the Empire flagship on the main screen. "That big ship is controlling all the others. If we can damage its communication systems, the whole fleet will be confused for a few minutes. That might give us enough time to escape." "How do we get close enough?" Jake asked. Pete was already putting on his spacesuit. "Someone has to manually target their communication array. The targeting computers are too damaged to do it automatically." Jake realized what Pete was planning. "You want to go outside the ship during a battle?" "It's the only way, Captain," Pete said. "I can use one of the maintenance pods to get close to their ship. I'll target their communications manually, then you can make the jump while they're confused. Dr. White looked up from her calculations. Pete, that's suicide. The Empire ship will see you coming and destroy your pod before you get close. Pete smiled sadly. Not if everyone else is shooting at the Thunder Bay. They won't notice one small maintenance pod. Jake wanted to say no. Pete was a good officer and a good friend. Losing him would hurt almost as much as losing Rick Stone earlier. But Jake also knew that Pete was right. It was their only chance. I can't order you to do this, Pete, Jake said, quietly. You're not ordering me, Captain, Pete replied. I'm volunteering. This crew got me through a lot of hard times. Now it's my turn to help all of you. Amy wiped tears from her eyes. There has to be another way. There isn't, Pete said firmly. He finished putting on his spacesuit and helmet. Just promise me you'll get everyone home safe. Jake shook Pete's hand. I promise. Pete left the bridge and headed for the maintenance bay. A few minutes later, his voice came through the radio. Pod launching now. Give me 2 minutes to get close, then hit that flagship with everything you've got. Jake watched on the screen as a tiny pod flew away from the Thunder Bay toward the massive Empire ship. The pod looked so small compared to the alien vessel that it was like watching an ant attack an elephant. Lisa, how's our jump drive? Jake asked. I can give you one small jump, Lisa answered. Not enough to escape completely, but maybe enough to get us out of their immediate range. The Thunder Bay continued to take heavy fire from the Empire ships. More systems failed and more crew members were injured. But everyone stayed at their stations waiting for Pete's signal. I'm in position. Pete's voice crackled through the radio. Beginning manual targeting sequence now. Jake held his breath and watched the screen. In a few seconds, they would know if Pete's sacrifice would save them all, or if the Thunder Bay would be destroyed along with humanity's last hope. Pete Walsh's small maintenance pod flew straight toward the Empire flagship like a bullet. The huge alien ship was 10 times bigger than the Thunder Bay, covered with weapons and armor. Pete knew he would probably die, but he didn't care. His friends needed him. Captain Jake Morrison watched from the Thunder Bay's bridge as Pete got closer to the enemy ship. The Empire vessels were still firing at the human battleship, not noticing the tiny pod approaching their flagship. Come on, Pete, Jake whispered. You can do it. Suddenly, bright explosions lit up the side of the Empire flagship. Pete had found the communication array and was destroying it with his pod's small weapons. The alien ship's lights started flashing as its systems went crazy. It's working, shouted Amy Davis from her navigation station. The Empire ships are losing contact with their command ship. All around the battlefield, alien vessels started moving in confused circles. Without orders from their flagship, they didn't know what to do. Some ships stopped firing completely. Others began shooting at empty space. But Pete wasn't finished. His voice came through the radio one last time. Jake, I'm going to ram their main communication tower. When I do, you'll have maybe 3 minutes before they fix their systems. Get out of here. Pete, no, Jake shouted into his communicator. Get back to the ship. Can't do that, Captain, Pete replied calmly. My pod is too damaged to make it back, but I can still help you escape. Tell my family I was thinking about them. On the main screen, Jake watched Pete's pod crash into the Empire flagship's communication tower. The explosion was huge, sending pieces of alien metal flying in all directions. The flagship went completely dark for several seconds. Jake felt tears in his eyes, but there was no time to mourn. Pete had given them a chance, and they couldn't waste it. Lisa, can you give us that jump now? Jake called to the engine room. Ready when you are, Captain, Lisa replied. Amy, plot a course through the asteroid field near the edge of the system, Jake ordered. Amy looked surprised. Captain, that asteroid field is very dangerous. No ship has ever flown through it safely. That's exactly why we're going there, Jake said. The Empire ships won't expect us to do something that stupid. The Thunder Bay made its jump just as the Empire vessels were starting to get new orders from their flagship. The human ship disappeared from the middle of the alien formation and reappeared at the edge of the solar system, near a huge field of floating rocks. Jump complete, Amy reported. But Captain, the Empire ships are following us. They'll be here in 2 minutes, Jake looked at the asteroid field on his screen. The rocks were big and moved in unpredictable patterns. Flying through them would be like trying to walk through a storm of flying boulders. But Jake had an idea. "Tom, how much ammunition do we have left?" Jake asked. Tom Baker checked his weapon systems. "Not much, sir. Maybe enough for 5 minutes of continuous firing." "That'll have to be enough," Jake said. "Amy, take us into the asteroid field at full speed." "Tom, I want you to shoot the asteroids, not the enemy ships." "Shoot the asteroids?" Tom asked, confused. "Trust me," Jake said. "Lisa, give me every bit of power you can squeeze out of our engines." The Thunder Bay flew into the asteroid field just as the Empire ships arrived. The alien vessels followed, but they were being very careful not to hit the floating rocks. Their perfect computers calculated safe paths through the dangerous area. But Jake wasn't being careful at all. Amy flew the Thunder Bay straight between the biggest asteroids, missing them by only a few feet. The ship rolled and spun to avoid the floating rocks, moving in ways that would have been impossible for the rigid Empire vessels. "Now, Tom," Jake shouted, "fire at the big asteroid on our left." Tom fired the ship's main weapons at a huge rock that was floating nearby. The blast broke the asteroid into thousands of smaller pieces, all flying in different directions. Empire ships following behind had to scatter to avoid being hit by the debris. "Again," Jake ordered. "Hit that cluster of rocks ahead of us." Tom fired again, creating another cloud of flying rock fragments. The Thunder Bay flew through the debris cloud, protected by its thick human-built armor. But the Empire ships, with their lighter construction, had to slow down and find safer paths. Dr. Karen White was watching her sensors carefully. "Captain, the Empire ships are having trouble following us. Their computers can't calculate safe paths through all this chaos." Jake smiled. Once again, human willingness to take crazy risks was giving them an advantage over the logical aliens, but the biggest test was still ahead. At the center of the asteroid field was the largest rock of all, a small, moon-sized asteroid that slowly spun in place. Amy's navigation computer showed that flying around it would take too long. The Empire ships would catch up before they could escape. "Amy, can we go through it?" Jake asked. "Through it, sir?" Amy's voice was shaky. "The asteroid is probably hollow inside, like most of them are," Jake explained. "If we can find a crack or cave, we might be able to fly straight through the middle." Lisa's voice came from the engine room. "Captain, that's insane. We don't know what's inside that thing." "The Empire ships will never expect us to try it," Jake said. "Amy, do you see any openings?" Amy studied her screens carefully. "There's a big crack on the near side, sir. It might go all the way through, but I can't tell for sure." Jake looked around the bridge at his remaining crew. These people had followed him through an impossible battle. They had trusted his crazy plan so far. Now he was asking them to risk everything on one final gamble. "What do you say, crew?" Jake asked. "Should we fly through a giant space rock?" "Let's do it, Captain," Amy said with determination. "I'm with you," added Tom. "All the way, sir," said Linda from communications. Jake took a deep breath. "Take us in, Amy. Full speed." The Thunder Bay flew straight toward the crack in the giant asteroid. The opening looked tiny compared to their ship, but as they got closer, it proved to be just wide enough for them to squeeze through. The ship entered the asteroid and found itself flying through a hollow tunnel filled with ice and smaller rocks. Amy had to steer carefully to avoid hitting the walls, but the tunnel did go all the way through. Behind them, the Empire ships reached the asteroid and stopped. They couldn't believe the humans had actually flown inside the giant rock. Their computer said it was impossible, so they waited outside for the Thunder Bay to come back out. But the Thunder Bay didn't come back out the same side. It emerged from the far end of the asteroid, already moving fast toward the edge of the solar system. By the time the Empire ships realized what had happened, the human ship was too far away to catch. Jake stood on his bridge and looked at the stars ahead. They had done it. One human ship had escaped from the entire Galactic Empire fleet. Pete's sacrifice had not been in vain. "Set course for the colonies," Jake ordered. "It's time to bring help back to Earth." Amy smiled as she programmed their destination. "Course set, Captain. We're going home. The Thunder Bay flew away from the battlefield, carrying the hope of humanity toward the distant colonies. Behind them, the confused Empire fleet was left to wonder how a single human ship had outsmarted their entire armada. The galaxy would remember this day. They had learned that humans could not be calculated or predicted. Sometimes the most primitive species could teach the most advanced civilizations about courage, sacrifice, and the power of never giving up. Jake Morrison and his crew had become legends, and their story would inspire resistance movements across the galaxy for generations to come.